Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. So, folks, we are going back to that wonderful world of the evil that is the JRC. But before we get into anything, real quick, as usual, the link to the article we are reading will be found in the description, as well as the video that kicked everything off and the petition to shut down the Judge Rotenberg Center. If you haven't already signed it, please do. Also, when we are talking about the JRC, there are vivid descriptions about the torture and abuse of disabled people, as well as a video that we do reference and clip in regards to the incident that happened in 2002 with Andre McCollins, which has actual footage of a person with a disability being tortured. So, if you have young ones present, please wear your headphones. Also, folks, it is exactly 4:46 a.m. in the morning. I'm beginning my regular schedule, so these are going to be videos that come out much earlier in the morning. So if I stumble over any of my words, or if I mispronounce any jargon, please accept my apologies in advance. Alright, without further ado, we're going back where we left off yesterday on this article. Torture is not medicine. We are going to the part here called the We Be Small, Be But Small. We are mighty. Now, to reference this is in regards to the massive groups of disability advocates and autism rights advocates and neurodiversity advocates. I do tend to run in all three circles that began the fight against this center, some who started it all the way back in 1994. So, without further ado, we are going to go into exactly that. Though we be but small, we are mighty. All right. So let's get started. Though we grew up on opposite sides of the country, we shared many interests and experiences that both drew us to the issue of abuse at JRC and that made us compatible personally and professionally. While neither of us had been institutionalized in a program like the JRC, nor spent significant parts of our school years in segregated special education setting, I did for math. You said. Both of us had been targeted for disability related harassment and discrimination by school officials, me, as well as peers, me. As bold, outspoken, unconventional people from the start, me. Sorry. We had frustrated and had been by neurotypicals who valued compliance and conformity for their own sake, and seemingly above all else, and whatever victories we might have won in these efforts tended to be moral rather than actual. Both of us also had tendencies to become interested in, and by neurotypical standards obsessed with, dark and violent subject matter, but from a perspective of wanting to solve the problems that we saw. Oh yeah, they try to use that on me too. Lydia, for instance, had a long-standing interest in the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and the U.S. government's subsequent repression of Arabs and Muslims as part of its so-called war on terror. And while by this point Shane was no longer as fixated on the horrors of animal experimentation as they had been as a child, they continued exploring themes of abuse and oppression through fiction for lack of concrete ideas on how to confront them in reality. That I never had any problems with. I always, when it comes to injustice, as you all in the Justice for Deaf community knows, I hit it head on and I hit it like a freaking. Oh, I don't even know. I can't think. It's morning. I'm like a brick through a window. Anyways, we joined the decades long fight to end adversives and close to JRC in 2009, about the same era I did. Around the same time that we were both entering the autistic activist community in Boston. I was more like dragged into it by parent allies. Lydia had grown in the Boston metro area and known that they were autistic since early adolescence. Was a member of the self-advocacy network, ASAM Boston chapter. By then a high school student, they were already drafting, then introducing a bill in Massachusetts state legislature that would have mandated police training on autism. I was actually in my state. I helped train the state troopers for the state of Missouri as regards to some of their work. So just putting that out there. Lydia had connected with ASAM when they learned about the neurodiversity movement from autism activists' criticism of the charity Autism Speaks, and began reading blogs by activists Bev Harp, Square 8, Mel Baggs, and Cassine Asamasu, Radical Neurodivergent Speaking. I got involved against Autism Speaks many moons ago as soon as that I Am Autism video came out. We've gone over that on this channel before. Lydia's early activism included organizing mass opposition to criminalization and restraints targeting autistic students in Arizona, Alabama, and Kentucky. It's still messed up to realize that Missouri, one of the most backward states, progressively out in all 50 states, when it comes to treating people with disabilities, is on the cutting edge somehow. Don't even ask me how that happened. I can only thank my parent allies and the medical practitioners here that still have half a brain and are actually willing to listen to us. I've worked with them many times. I've even helped them develop plans out in our area. ABA is still a problem here, but out here in Missouri it's not quite as controversial to say no to ABA as it is in some of these other states. Shane, meanwhile, had spent much of their childhood undergoing, recovering from, or trying to avoid involuntary psychiatric and surgical treatment. However, they only learned they were autistic as an adult, at about the same time they were applying to law school. Although they had initially joined online message boards like Wrong Planet, yep, I'm on there, and Aspies for Freedom to learn more about their autistic identity and find friends. They soon ran across information on widespread, systematic abuse that autistic and other disabled people face in the name of treatment. I met my most of these people through the I can't even remember their names. The Southwest PAC out here throughout Missouri and this general Southwest region, and Judavine Center for Autism, ran by a friend of mine by the name of Becky Blackwell and created by her mom. And that's how I got involved with some of the autistic activists out here in my part of the state. They're the ones who introduced me to People First, but Southwest Missouri and all of that. It was in this context and in the aftermath of several recent and highly publicized exposés of abuse at the JRC that we separately became aware of the abuse going on in our own figurative backyard. As with other things in both our lives that had horrified and fascinated us, we started painstakingly collecting information on the issue. They, like Greg Miller, have been a primary contact when it comes to getting information about the center, by the way. Then acting in whatever may become apparent, writing articles, speaking publicly, testifying at hearings, first on our own and then increasingly collaboratively. New resistance and organizing against the school shock. This is going to be about that mass collaborative effort when things really got going, especially after the 2012 video clip went viral. While attending the law school in Boston, Shane threw themselves into challenging JRC, confronting Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick about the JRC during a public appearance, authoring two papers on legal strategies to stop the JRC, leading a session at the annual Rebellious Lawyering Conference, and giving an invited presentation at the Symposium on Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications of Autism Research. In 2012, Shane attended nearly the entire medical malpractice trial against the JRC for the torturing of Andre McCollins. Remember, he's the one who wrote all that I've already gone over on this channel. Sitting only feet behind Matthew Israel while taking painstaking notes for the public. During the trial, video of JRC's shocks first aired publicly. Shane also began working with troubled teen industry survivors, including the Community Alliance for Ethical Treatment of Youth, CAFT. While at CAFT, Shane took a leading role in organizing what would be one of the largest anti-JRC protests in the next decade. In July 2012, outraged by the McCollins video, hundreds of activists, many forced treatment and institutionalization survivors, gathered in Boston for a State House rally, then reconvened outside the JRC, marching through rain and barricades. This was part of what began the Occupy the Judge Rotenberg Center movement. In the fall 2012, Shane moved to Washington, D.C. to work as CAFT's policy associate. Shane took the lead role in drafting and presenting a report on institutional abuse targeting youth for the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture's expert consultation on torture in healthcare settings. Remember when I said we were the ones who got the UN involved? This was what I was talking about. We all were the ones who signed that letter. We were the ones who got the UN involved. The FDA had nothing to do with it. Moving on. There, Shane connected with Lydia, who authored a followed-up submission on JRC on ASAN's behalf. Lydia's report later turned into an article, Compliance is Unreasonable. The human rights implications of compliance-based behavioral interventions under the Convention Against Torture and Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, published in a compilation edited by the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. ASAN, meanwhile, invited Shane to author a brief history of the JRC for its groundbreaking anthology on the neurodiversity movement. You know it's bad, folks. People to this day are still trying to defend those shocks. But when you got the UN, who did their own private investigation, call it cruel and unusual, inhumane beyond all reason, and they feel the need to launch their own private investigation, the UN, and you're trying to tell me that this helps people and saves lives? I do believe they are the experts, not you, JRC. Just saying. Moving on. During the same period, Lydia worked alongside advocates from ASAN Boston to lobby the Massachusetts lawmakers for measures to limit and stop JRC's abuses. Lydia also began to curate information about the JRC for a dedicated page on their blog Autistic Hoya, which would later become the JRC Living Archive and Document Repository. It really has. We've used a lot of her information on this channel. So thank you, Lydia. I appreciate it. Throughout 2012 and 2013, former employee Gregory Miller wrote a series of widely publicized anti-JRC essays. He describes vicarious trauma from witnessing abuse and being coerced to participate before realizing the full extent of the harm he was responsible for. His letters to the JRC condemning it, and his resignation. Miller's Change.org petition amassed over 200,000 signatures. You saw that in the video clips. The one that I have up now is with the most recently us finding out that this is still going on in spite of the FDA ban. And and incited another rally at the Massachusetts State House. There, Miller spoke alongside Cheryl McCollins, who by now had been barraged with constant exposure to the video of her son's torture. The year saw the 3 anti-JRC rallies before July 2012 demonstration. Meanwhile, Lydia worked with Miller and others to present about the JRC's abuses for various autism and disability advocacy organizations. In January 2013, we planned a demonstration against the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's reticence to regulate the shock devices set at its Maryland headquarters. The night before, we huddled in a college dorm building while creating colorful signs, "Stop the Shocks." People are not experiments. No compromise on torture. Disability rights are human rights. Ban the GED, the JRC's shock device. 3 others joined us on the traffic island across the entrance. It was a lonely day for us 5, and nearly as many Homeland Security police cars arrived to watch us. 1 month later, in February 2013, Lydia received an email containing a message from a survivor hoping to discuss JRC. Lydia replied to the letter writer, received permission to publish it anonymously, and began circulating it to increase consciousness of the JRC's abuses. Roughly simultaneously, Massachusetts quietly filed a motion to void the 1987 court order enshrining legality of the shocks. Come 2014, and rumors that the FDA officials would finally consider banning electric shock aversives, we were split with Shane in Oregon and Lydia in Jordan. The FDA announced a public hearing on the possibility of banning the shocks in April 2014. We've read through that document. Sheen mounted a campaign to raise funds to cover their and later Lydia's travel to present testimony. Before our flights, we worked for 2 nights across continents on our first anniversary preparing detailed, heavily cited comments in attempts to preemptively bury the JRC supporters in research. Amid hours of testimony from advocates who worked in the coalition of bridging policy, research, and activism, and JRC's sometimes screaming supporters, survivors Jennifer Masumba and Ian Cook commanded full attention from all present. Masumba's testimony, delivered by video, described intense pain, burns, and post-traumatic stress disorder caused by repeated shocks to punish and control her. Cook opened his testimony by announcing that since leaving JRC, he has come out as transgender, noting defiantly JRC's use of his dead name while confined there. His conclusion could compel no response from the JRC supporters. I was in an abusive relationship 2 years ago, and part of why I fell prey to it is that the JRC instilled a lesson in me that it is okay for people to hurt me so long as they are trying to correct me. Yeah, just saying. Since that hearing, we have collaborated to support many other disabled people in organizing direct action and submitting testimony against the torture, drawing constantly on the leadership of survivors like Masumba, Cook, and Terry Dubois, who have all spoken out against the horrors they survived and witnessed. In October 2014, sensing declining interest in anti-JRC activism, Lydia hosted Shane and Masumba for a panel on institutional abuse targeting disabled people, which received modest press coverage amid announcements of Masumba filing a lawsuit. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That wanting interest, that one moment that we had in 2012, and then how we've basically dropped off the map and don't exist again. In August 2015, we organized a community testimony against the JRC for the perennial Massachusetts hearing, but once again, the legislature refused to act. In December 2015, we presented on JRC and other institutions' abuses to a packed room at a national conference. In April 2016, 2 years after its hearing, the FDA finally announced a proposal to ban the shocks. Along with many others, we pushed for massive public pressure to finalize the regulation as law, but the FDA never made a decision. By 2017, the presidential administration changed amid conflicting indications about federal agencies' desires to either accelerate or severely delay their regulation-making powers. Apart from ADAPT's large-scale public actions in October 2016 at JRC and March 2018 targeting the FDA in Washington, D.C. and Maryland, public attention to and interest in the JRC has largely faded. In June 2018, when a Massachusetts probate court ruled in JRC's favor in the lawsuit stemming from 1987, one major door closed. Okay, so that gives you guys a good background from how a good majority of us came into this fight. I was also part of the Shane and Lydia area. I was one of the people out of the Southwest region that came out against the JRC, as did a lot of folks, Becky Blackwell being one of the most prominent in my mind who, like I said, started along with her mother the Judavine Center for Autism out in St. Louis that's now covered a good majority of the Southwest region. And yeah, folks, this is how long this fight's been going on. We got our one moment out in the media, and then, I don't know, people just stopped caring. They stopped caring about those kids that are being tortured in that place. And because of that lack of pressure, because that pressure was let up by the general populace, then the JRC felt emboldened by that and are even now depriving children and adults of sleep, of food, of their basic human rights. They are shocking them in their sleep. They are shocking them in the showers, shocking them in the classroom. There's not a moment of rest for these people, and therefore there's not a moment of rest for me or any of the rest of us that have been in this fight until that place is closed down. Because the fact of the matter is, folks, as long as that place is open, they're going to keep pushing this. Therefore, I must keep pushing that they are closed down forever. All right, folks, that's all I've got for this morning. Now, as always, we don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed time to time. So please don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. And as always, folks, we hope here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.